Let's spend a little more time. I keep talking about the forms. We haven't really talked about the forms so much. Like I haven't just asked you what are the Platonic forms. So I'm going to do that now. Because that's what one is supposed to glimpse up here. That's reality. That's the truth. What are these forms? Because this is important for this imitation conversation that we're getting ready to go into. What are the Platonic forms? What's the form of a chair? Well, here's a chair, right? Physical world, we can and all that. What's the form of a chair? Better watch it. Form of a chair. Chair has a form, right? There's a form of a chair. Right? What's the relation between the form of a chair and a chair? And the chair that we sit down in?
Isn't that there's just like one form of everything? And like, I know you talked about like chairs and beds in that second chapter, and you said like that or God just made one bed so that like all beds were made by.
Yeah.
I haven't really phrased that in
Yeah.
sense, but yeah.
But no, that's, I mean, but what, so what does that mean? What does that mean?
Isn't there 3 forms of everything?
Yeah. Let's look with the one right now. Then we'll explore on how many of them there are, right? Because this is the part of, so that does get raised. It gets raised in book 2, and then the first part of book 10 really goes back to this thing. And part of it is what's reality versus imitation. What can one know? Because you can't know stuff that isn't real, right? You see what I mean? So that's why I'm asking this. Zach, I said.
I guess it's the fact that like God creates something, and every other subsequent form is an imitation. So regardless of, I guess like the original and its relation to it, the next one can never be exactly the same.
But this is before we get into the conversation about imitation. That's clearly where we're headed. But I think to be clear about what the issue is with imitation, you have to be clear on what a form was supposed to be in the first place, right? And why it's important that philosophers actually get a chance to glimpse that.
I'm not sure, but is it like the idea, the true form and like the idea, and that's the main one thing which is true, and then you have someone else who tries to construct it, but the first thing which is there, which is divine, is like the idea, and that's the one universal thing which everyone tries to
No, I mean you're all on top of this thing. I'm just waiting for a particular kind of phrasing.
I thought of it as kind of, this could be totally wrong, I thought of it as kind of like the essence of it. Like that when I'm thinking of a bed, there's like an ideal that I'm kind of like alluding to, which makes it be classified as a bed, because it holds to like this, whatever I consider to be like the essence or like, I don't know.
I mean, I hear terms ideal, essences, right? And these are all historically terms that have been attached to this thing.
Is it kind of like the absolute operational definition of a concept?
I mean, if this were a class on, if this was just about logic, because if this class was about logic, that would be the logical equivalent of some of these other things. But what does that mean? That's what I mean. Sure, it's the idea, essence, definition. What does that mean? What does it mean for a form, the form of a chair, to be the essence or the ideal or the definition of a chair? I mean, does that really clarify what a form is?
From what I got from reading, I thought it was that a chair or a bed has certain parts to it and they can be easily replicated by someone else. As to where if you're a craftsman or something, you know what the parts are that go into a chair, and you can build it accordingly.
We keep sliding into imitation, right? Into the issue of imitation, which the Greek word for that is mimesis. And all of the arts are imitative arts. And we'll talk about that, right? It's imitation. But we have to have some sense of what this thing is before we start talking about what's being imitated. And who, in fact, is good at imitating it, and who isn't. whose imitations are reliable, right? And whose imitations aren't. Whose imitations are deceiving and whose imitations aren't. Because that's what the first half of book 10 is. But I don't want to move too fast. I want to make sure we're at least clear on what is sitting at the bottom of this conversation. The Platonic forms. 20 years of education to see this. Right? That's what, you go through the whole thing so you get a glimpse of the Platonic forms. If you're lucky, if you're one of the handful that make it through the entire process. What is it? What are these? And this is also an important question because if you're supposed to apply this stuff to the real world, to the world that we walk around in, the sensual world, we got to be clear on what the relationship between those two things are. So I'm taking a little bit of time here on this. Any more guesses?
Okay.
You mean it this time?
Yeah,
Okay,
I just
sorry.
read something. So it's like they make the like chair according to what they know about it, but they don't.
Who's that?
They didn't like the crafts person.
Okay, you see now,
But
okay.
then
Let me
they-
just start making a list of imitators, right? Because that's part, so this is the list of imitators. So we have craftsmen.
But they didn't make up the idea of the chair.
Craftsmen, right, or artisans or whatever, and then we got like poets, right, those are. So is that an answer or a question?
Well, no, an answer like they made the chair, but they didn't come up with the idea of the chair. The craftsman.
Yeah. So what does that mean? Mom?
Doesn't he talk about like three users, like painter, carpenter, and God?
Yeah, that's what I would say. Well, I'm trying to focus on this part.
Could we say that the chair is some sort of, not an imitation, but a representation of the original form?
So the chair you're sitting in is a representation.
Yeah, so all the chairs in the world are a representation of the chair that's in the form.
So the Platonic form, I don't know, you said original. Right. I mean, we can say that. You just did. Sounds great. Still not sure that we know what Platonic forms are. Okay. I hope I actually make this clear. You want to try,
I
Russ?
just want to add another one maybe. This is, it's like the initial as well. It's not just like, I think it's like the first one of all of them too, like, not right
Yeah. I think the original captures that. I mean, I think you're right.
It's really hard to put into words that way.
Yeah, see this? Go ahead.
Nature?
Hmm?
Nature? Is it nature like, which is the first like?
What do you mean by nature? Do you mean like reality? Like the ontos piece
I
here?
think that would be the first idea, and then you can imitate that. Is that like essentially the topmost level where?
I mean, how are you using nature here? Because nature isn't something we've been using very much.
Because
So I'm not-
he says like, the imitation is two folds removed from nature.
That's because you're talking about imitation, I'm talking about Platonic forms. Right? I'll come back to you specifically about that, right? But all this twice removed and thrice removed stuff doesn't make sense if you don't know what it's removed from, right? This is why people spend 20 years on this, right? It's not just intuitive. Go ahead.
I don't know, like its purpose. Like when you go to Ontos or Theos, you figure out like in a just society everybody has a role in a specific like spot. Like a chair has a specific purpose, and like a bed has a specific purpose. So knowing like
Or this definitional piece too. I would ask you how to define a chair. But what's the definition of a chair?
something to sit down.
And it's got to be a part of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So all chairs have to have that functional thing to it.
Yeah.
But something to sit down on could have a gazillion different shapes, right? Right. So there's a purpose, there's a functional part on this. So the thing that all sensual, that we can determine with our senses, right? The thing that all sensual chairs, that we can know, right? Knowledge is tied to kind of the sensual world. They all participate in an ideal. So you guys have all kind of said this a little bit in your own different ways. So there's an ideal, or there's a platonic form of chair. And all of these things demonstrate the attribute of chairness. Right? They all share in chairness. They're not all the same chair, and they can't be the perfect replication of whatever the ideal was. But chairness is an attribute that they all have. They might have more than one attribute. I mean, you might be able to eat off of it, so it could be a chair and a table. You know what I mean? So it could, there could be other things, right? But they all participate in the form. They're all connected to the form in some way of chairness. They all participate in that. They're not the form, right? But they all participate in that.
So does that mean we don't understand what the form of chair is?
Some people understand the form, right?
I think I understand.
Well, you might be one of those people. Okay? But what we get up here is a look at what the ideals are. And we don't assume that whatever this is up here is what we face in here, particularly these cheap plastic things. Right? You see what I mean? I mean, that's the important piece, that there is an ideal, original, definitional chair. That's really important. That all things that we call chairs have to have some sort of participation. But that doesn't mean they look like it. It might mean that they function like it. Right? You have something you can sit down on there. Right? So it's almost like, I'm running out of space here. But like,